Now, we all know that lately there is this big issue called the Great Resignation. Some of them actually change to a better job or to a new vocation, but majority of them are actually getting used to work from home. So in other words, they prefer to stay at home, work from home, do their chores at home at the same time, work in an office within the environments of a home. And you find that they get very acclimatized. So they are very reluctant to go back to office. Same thing with our practice of the Buddha's teachings in the Dharma. We have all attended our Sunday puja at home. We have been online for almost 2 years. And it's very reluctant to drag our feet to the Buddhist center in order to come together as a community, come together to practice together rather than individually in our respective homes. Indeed, this is actually one of the spirit that we want to cultivate and encourage as much as possible. That you feel better, isn't it, when you are in this type of environment, listening to a Dharma talk or attending a lesson, rather than sitting at home on your lazy couch with the computer or your laptops. And of course, you don't switch on the video. So which means nobody knows what you're doing. And especially for speakers, Speakers always have this problem of knowing whether anybody is listening or not when you're actually giving a talk or a speech or a lesson. So there is a lot of joy the moment it was announced that we can all come back together again and we can hold our Sunday pujas physically and at the same time being able to see each other live. Live not on the screen, but live in real person. And I think this is one of the joys that we look forward to, as well as also one of the most important practice that we want. And we all know that throughout the many years, we have seen a lot of friends that they have this syndrome where you are out of touch or out of sight. Then they slowly drift away. And a lot of friends have actually stopped their practice or suspend their practice. And this is a question now being asked, whether we have been taught the art of trying to sustain our practice on the path of the Dhamma. Now, the word sustaining or sustainability is actually a very key word nowadays. And you'll find that in a lot of our corporates, in a lot of communal discussions, that we need to sustain all our interests, sustain all our efforts, sustain even the technology and the environment in order to have a better life. And in the practice of Dharma is no different. We need to have some commitment as well as also some efforts to sustain this practice. Now the Dhamma, or the truth taught by the Buddha, is uncovered gradually through sustained practice. In other words, you don't be enlightened the moment you take refuge in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. You don't get enlightened after attending 1 year of practice in a Buddhist center. And likewise, a lot of people think that they will be enlightened by having the name in the membership certificate of a society. Because sometimes when you ask them, are you a Buddhist? Yeah. You see my membership certificate on the wall? And because of that certificate, they think that they are a Buddhist. But the Buddha made clear many times in his teachings that awakening doesn't just occur like a bolt. Or we usually use this word called sudden enlightenment. And it appears out of the blue. But maybe for certain people, yes, because they have been well trained in the past, previous lives. And they just need that spark, that bolt, in order to spark off that realization and thus become enlightened. Now we have a lot of untrained and unprepared mind. So we need to nurture it, we need to cultivate it, we need to condition it, we need to put a lot of efforts to sustain that practice, which accumulates into a long journey of many, many tiers and stages. In other words, Rome is never built in one day. It is a long journey. But the long journey meets with a lot of trials and tribulations. In other words, we meet with a lot of difficulties. Now, just as the ocean has a gradual shelf, right, a gradual slope, a gradual inclination, sometimes with a sudden drop off, only after a doctrine or after a long stretch. So in the same way, the Buddha's doctrine and discipline, called the Dhamma Vinaya, now it has a gradual training, right? Gradual performance, gradual progression, with a penetration to agnosis only after a long stretch. We may strive for many years, and sometimes we strive for many lives before we can even come to a little realization and then guaranteed that in the next life we will continue. Sometimes this life we are very active, next life we take a holiday. We go somewhere else and we get committed to something else, and then we stop our practice. So the sustainability is not there. So the Buddha's teachings are infused with this notion of gradual development. That's why he understands our human weaknesses and efforts. And his method is gradual instruction. Sometimes one time not enough, two times not enough, three times. That's why we have been asked many times to recite many, many times. When we say, take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, we say, I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dhamma, I take refuge in the Sangha. Tak cukup. For the second time, I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dhamma, I take refuge in the Sangha. Lagi tak cukup. So you got to go for the third time, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Why so many times? Satu kali cukup lah. If we can be, enhanced and encouraged just by one, it's good enough. But unfortunately, our human mind is such that we need to be reminded, we need to be cajoled, we need to be pushed and encouraged. Of course, there are many suttas where we were asked to chant round and round and round, and sometimes even to extent of 108 times, or continuously towards the night, just chanting Metta Sutta alone, just to drum it into our minds and remember it for good. And it's good that in the past we have been able to do that because the Buddha's suttas have been passed on for generations through the oral tradition. Oral tradition means no books, no writings, not written, but it is passed from teacher to disciple just by reciting over and over and over and then memorizing it. And that's why we have this recitation, we have chanting. So chanting is actually an oral tradition which is passed down from the days of the Buddha. Until today, we are still practicing it as much as possible. That we recite what the Buddha taught. And then we try to memorize it, and then we can recite it without referring to any books. Of course, the human weakness is such that after 500 years, the battery don't last. So everyone will then have to say, oh, we must put it in writing. And that is the time when the suttas are actually recorded in writing on ola leaves, which are kept as records. And until today, we are fortunate enough that some of these teachings still remain sustained. So the sustainability is actually enforced. The Buddha's teachings are infused with the notion of gradual development. In other words, his method of gradual instruction, or Anupubikata, which appears in various forms in countless suttas, now always follow the same arc. He guides progressively, he guides newcomers from the first principles through progressively more advanced teachings, and all the way to the fulfillment of the Four Noble Truths and the full realization of Nibbana. In other words, until the day when we can see in real what the Four Noble Truths represents. Because this is a formula of life, actually. The formula towards the resolution of all our dukkha. Noble Truth of dukkha. Noble Truth of the cause of dukkha. Noble Truth of the cessation of the cause of dukkha. And the Noble Truth of the path leading to the cessation of the cause of dukkha. So until then, if we have not got that formula in our mind sustained, we will not be able to realize Nibbana. So here is the Buddha's 6-stage gradual training, of course in more detail. In other words, there is a lot of practice of virtues, such as generosity or dana, because this actually softens us up. Dana is a methodology that softens our minds and our hearts, that we are able to give, we are able to share, we are able to let go, rather than hold it, grasp it, because this mind of ours is a grasping mind. The moment it grabs, it refuses to let go. And eventually it holds for a long period of time. And we have to slowly let go, grabs, let go, grabs. And then eventually grabs less and less and less. Until one fine day, we totally do not grasp anymore. And that is called liberation. And virtues are actually the molding factors and the conditioning factors that molds us, that conditioned us to have the ability and the sustainability to then realize the teachings. But we need the discipline. We need to have a methodology and the discipline to control. In other words, to set us on the path of sustainability. What are the discipline? Number one, of course, is your 5 precepts. Your 5 precepts prepare you for the sila, for the moral ground. In other words, with that foundation, then you find that it's easy to cultivate the mind. It's easy to be feeling free and less stressed out in order to practice the mind. Of course, 5 precepts is not good enough. Then you have to move on to practice a little bit more on certain occasions. In other words, on your new moon and your full moon, 2 specific days, if you can, observe 8 precepts. And this is not just occasion only. It needs to be continuous, every new moon, every full moon. Because when you want to talk about sustainability, it has to be done over and over again, a gradual process to slowly polish the diamond until it shines. And of course, there is probably once in a few years, you will decide that you want to enter into a novitiate or novice program where you take on more precepts and become more disciplined during that period of time of 7 days, 14 days, or even to extend 1 month, 2 months, and some longer than this. And that is when the upasata of 7 days is important. Now, there is a lot of our Buddhist friends who doesn't remember new moon and who doesn't remember full moon until he sees his friend. Hey, why today vegetarian? Hey, don't you know today is actually new moon or today is full moon? So it has to be part and parcel of our life in that practice, so that we can actually keep reminding ourselves that, today is new moon. I have to practice a little bit more. Today is full moon. I have to be a bit more religious or practice the precepts higher. And I think you all know the significance of the new moon and the full moon. Because this is the day when we are at the heights of our emotion, We are also at the heights of our achievements because there is more blood flowing to our heads due to the gravity of the moon. So it's a planetary influence. It's an astronomical influence by the planets around us. And one of them is actually the luna, the moon. And on such a night, when the moon is full, you get phenomena like high tide. You get phenomena like agitation. You even get phenomena of madness. And that's why people who are mad on that night is called lunatic. They get very agitated. And it's also on this night that you can, what you call, become very emotional. That's why your romantic nights are always full night. Why? Because other days want to say that three little words very difficult. But on that night itself, wow, can repeat and repeat and repeat. You know? I love you, I love you, I love you. And it's also on that night itself that you can have the highest achievements, the greatest thinking, the greatest realization. And that's what the Buddha gained his enlightenment on the full moon night on the Vesak month. So in other words, the moon has very strong effect on us. And thus we need to practice a little bit more so that our body, when it's been agitated, because we feel emotional, we feel what you call helpless, we feel very confused to that extent. So we need to pacify more during this period. That's why we say we are more religious. We try to observe our vegetarian diet. We try to practice more precepts to control ourselves. And some even to the extent on Upasata days, retreat into the Buddhist temples and centers and monasteries to try and observe the 8 precepts and observe their speech, their thoughts, and their action, so that they don't say anything which they don't intend to say. They don't do anything which they don't intend to do. And they don't, what you call, think of anything that they don't intend to think. So it is a very significant. And we need to practice this over and over again. I want to bring you to this very favorite game. This is called the snake and ladder game, isn't it? When we were young, once upon a time, we like to play this game. We throw the dice. And then when the dice moves, it meets the ladder. So what does it mean? You progress. And then you throw the dice again, you move, and then you meet the snake head. That is the time you regress, you deteriorate, and you, what you call, succumb to temptations. And then eventually you come down. And then you throw the dice again, you meet the ladder, you go up, you meet the snake head, you come down, up and down, up and down. We are exactly like that. Today you come to the center, you learn something very inspiring. You go to the meditation center, you learn meditation and you get so much joy and peace. And eventually you say, every day I must practice. True enough, you go back, every day you practice. 2 weeks later, you practice every other day. Maybe 1 month later, you practice once a week. Then 1 year later, never practice anymore. The battery doesn't last. You get inspired, you get encouraged, you get committed, but that practice did not last. Or you could have met with your snakehead. You get tempted and says, why waste time meditating? You should join in some other activities. So you get tempted, you get actually sort of pulled away. And thus you meet what we call the snakehead, and then you fall again. So in other words, you move up and down, but you never reach the box 100. Now you are in box 96. Right? Look at 96. Throw the dice. 96, you get a 6. The dice is a 6. So what do? You move 97, 98, 99, 100. 4. 2 more. Then you move backwards. 99, 98. One big snake head waiting for you there. Slide again. So near yet so far. And that's what we all are. And I always like to give the analogy of a person standing beside a stream. You know, a water stream. And then you look at the stream and you say, wow, the stream is so refreshing. The stream is so joyful. The stream is so pleasant that you decide to put one leg in. And then you say, wow, very nice. Then you pull the leg out. Then again, you put the other leg in. And then you pull it out. You put one leg in, pull it out. You put one leg in, pull it out. And you keep on doing this. Are you on the same spot of the riverbank? And are you same spot in the stream? Until one fine day, you then decide that when you put one leg in, and now you decide to put the other leg in, and now both your feet are in the stream. Then it's a matter of time. The stream will then carry you because you're already in the stream. Your whole body is in the stream now. And the stream will then carry you to your destination. And that terminology is called a sotapan, a stream enterer. Until the day you are a stream enterer, you are still in the snake and ladder game. Until the day that you enter the stream fully and become what we call a stream enterer or sotapan, you will still be in the cycle of samsara. But the stream enterer, which means to say that you have now 6 more existence to go. And it is a matter of time, you will attain your enlightenment. Of course, the next stage is called Sakadagami. It's called a once returner. That means you return only once. The next stage is called Anagami. It's called a never returner. You're waiting already for the next moment. And the 4th stage is called an Arahant, which is attainment of enlightenment. So there are 4 stages of sainthood, we call this. Sotapan, Sakadagami, Anagami, and then Arahanta. So until and unless we go into the stream, we will still be circling round and round and round. And sometimes we can fall out. And we can be lost. And you can be lost for many lives, yet still can't find the way again back. And subsequently, one fine day, maybe you are able to meet with some Buddhas or Arhantas, or even some good, inspiring teachers who then put you back into the game again. And thus you start all over. But do we want to be in that position? We want to ensure that from now onwards, that we have taken a first step, that we sustain ourselves. We prepare ourselves to continuously be born again and again and again, and to be in touch with the Buddha Dharma. So you get a chance to be sure that hopefully during this journey, during your association with the Buddha's teachings, that you have an opportunity to progress with a lot of ladders and finally hopefully reach the box 100 without difficulty. But you need a lot of sustainability. You need to sustain the practice. So you find that in this snake and ladder game, there is a lot of trials and tribulations. A lot of our friends who have come to the Buddhist centers or Buddhist temples or Buddhist communities, but after some time, you see the dropouts. They then slowly fade away. Then they fall back to their old ways. They fall back to the way that they were used before they come to the center. And some of these issues could be expectation. Expectation means when they came to this center or to certain Buddhist community, they expect perfection. They expect that the community to treat them well. They expect the community to take care of them. They expect the community to guide and protect them all the time. But all communities have its weakness. All society have its weakness. All centers also have the what you call the pro and the cons. So when you expect and it doesn't happen, it doesn't satisfy you, then you feel that you are lost. You are what you call disillusion. And then you then slowly slipped out. Now there is also what we call disappointment. Disappointment because you expect to progress. You expect to achieve certain stages. Unfortunately, struggling for so long, sacrificing so much time and effort. Yet you are still on that riverbank, putting your feet in and putting your feet out, and then enjoying the coolness of the stream only for a short momentary time. But unfortunately, you have not been able to move from the spot. You become disappointed. You become frustrated. And again, that could be a decision of a dropout. Thirdly, of course, you have a lot of distraction. You get distracted because you may have embarked on another hobby. You may embark on another adventure. You may embark on another teaching. Suddenly someone comes and tell you, that why you have to struggle so on, meditate every day, All you have to do is climb into my plane and I fly you to your destination. The way to climb a mountain has many, many ways. Imagine that this mountain is that you have to climb to the top in order to be able to see 360 degrees and all around you, and then you realize what absolute truth is about. That means it's only at the top that you'll be able to see the reality of things. Otherwise, you are only doing a lot of speculation. When you're on this side of the mountain, you speculate what the other side is because you have not seen it. So you speculate, the other side, the people are very ferocious one. The people got a lot of what they call bushy hairs. And they are what you call very fearful, fearsome. Until unless you are at the top, then only you are able to see, they look the same like you. The absolute truth is the nature of all things. But in order to reach the top, there are many ways to reach the top. You could be saying, okay, why not I do like this? I go around in spiral. And I go around the mountain, spiral, go around, and each time I go around, I move up a little elevation. And then eventually you spiral, and then eventually you reach the top. The other one is saying that, I would like to walk what you call zigzag on one side of the mountain. So I walk zigzag, and then eventually, slowly, I reach the mountain. Another one says, not challenging. What I do is I like to find the steepest and the most, what you call dangerous slope, because adventurous. So I climb upside down also. In order to climb, go through the crevices and through mountain climbing. And then eventually I reach the top. There's another person who says, no need. I got a helicopter waiting for you there. You just jump into my helicopter and then then you land on the top. And a lot of us are actually looking for that shortcut solution to resolve a lot of our problems. And I have a lot of friends who come back and says that, sometimes when I pray to the Buddha doesn't seem to answer me. Sometimes when I, request for things to happen, but it didn't happen. I pray for certain events, but it didn't materialize. You get discouraged. You say, not effective. But there is another one where you pray to him or you pray to her. Your wish will be granted. It's like a fairy godmother. And then you say, isn't that an easier way? You change your ways. You get distracted. And then you are now no longer on that, what you call the Dhamma path. And that is where the sustainability fails. Lastly, of course, there is these personalities. Because we are dealing with fellow human beings in association, in a community. There are chances that we meet up with people whom some of them are not that wise, or they are foolish enough to commit certain failures and disappointment. And then we get disillusioned and we say, no, this center no good. Or this community is not supportive. Or the leaders there are not what you call good enough for me. Then you decide to move and you keep on hopping like a kangaroo. And each hop, you think that you can get, but you can't. Each hop again, you hop and you think you can get, you can't. And eventually you get disillusion. And the sustainability of the practice then becomes a question mark. So therefore, you are encouraged to have a lot of Kalayana Mittas, because these are friends and Dhamma friends who is actually very important in growing up together, promoting your strengths, encouraging you and cajoling you along the path. Of course, they can't really pull you. They can't provide you the helicopter. They will show you the path, but you must walk the way. In other words, you must have a lot of good friends who are then able to form a community, a family, where you can share your difficulties. And some of them could be more experienced, though they may not be enlightened, but at least they have knowledge which they have accrued through their long years of association, and they can be your counselor, and they can be of your help. And that's the reason why in the beginning I mentioned that we must come back and meet physically so that we can renew these bonds, renew this friendship, and renew this relationship so that we can support each other. Because this path is not an easy path. You need to have a lot of supporters. You need to have a lot of friends to help us out. So community like Nalanda, community like other Buddhist societies or other Buddhist centers, they provide us a platform where we can actually count on each other and push us from the back so that we are able to walk the path together. So when you're engaged in the Dharma community, this is indeed a positive effort that we all would like to have. So therefore, count yourself very fortunate that you have an opportunity to engage yourself in a community like Nalanda. And that is where you have families who looks after us, who takes care of our needs, and who also encourage us to move along the path. The other one is you must have a home altar. Some of us, in order to keep on that reminder, we need to actually meet the Buddha as often as possible, or see the Buddha, or remember the Buddha and his teachings as often as possible. A lot of our friends who comes to the center on Vesak Day, and eventually they were so, what you call, active, bowing, praying, engaging in activities, but only for that day. Hopefully that what the blessings that they get during this period of time will last them 365 days. Then they come back for recharging later on the next year. Or when they wake up that morning and says, hey, why today is a holiday? Oh, today is Vesak Day. Yeah, I must go and recharge battery. And I've seen some of our members who actually sort of like, when they go to the temple, they insist that they must have a string. And do you know that that string was worn for 1 whole year? Kiam chai already. Imagine you bathe and you wash. That string is still there. And they say, no, the battery is there. And next Vesak, they will go back, cut it, and then have a new one attached to it, and then it lasts 1 more year. It's like changing batteries lah. But often than not, when we have these difficulties in life, as Buddhists, we were told that we should take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and in the Sangha. Whenever you have difficulties or whenever you have problems, whenever your mind is not at ease. So you then remember, oh yeah, as a Buddhist, since I've taken refuge in the Buddha, let me go to the Buddha and seek solace, consolation, and probably remember what he taught. But there are many people who went to the Buddha and then look at the image and says, do I really know you? Do you really can help me? Because your relationship is only once a year. In other words, the affinity to the Buddha and remembering the Buddha's virtues and remember the Buddha's life itself and the life that he represents throughout so many existences is only for once a year. So therefore, when you have less meetings or less of relationship, the Buddha image do not help. So you need to actually try to have that practice of going before the Buddha image and then remembering his virtues. Remember that this is my teacher. And whenever I'm in trouble, I shall come before the teacher. And sometimes, even without uttering a word, without saying a prayer, you just sit down and look at the Buddha image. You get a sense of peace. You get a sense of comfort. You still your minds. And that's all it needs. Because our mind is confused because it is in disarray. It's in confusion. But you need to still it down. You need to settle it, calm it down. And the Buddha image gives us that solace. Of course, the taking refuge in the Buddha does not work, never mind. You still got your second line of defense. And that is taking refuge in the Dhamma. What did the Buddha teach? What did the Buddha advise when you are faced with this dilemma, when you're faced with this problem? Then you recall your lessons, your talks, your lectures, and people who have actually advised you. And then you remember the words, especially the Dhammapada. Though it may be short, and you did not catch the meaning at that time. But when you are in times of trouble, the Dhammapada, the words in the Dhammapada is very, very powerful. When you are sick, when your body is sick, don't allow your mind to be sick. Sekarang you hear, sini keluar. So you don't register. But when the time comes, you then recall these words. It becomes so meaningful that you say, I will follow this advice and I will overcome my difficulties, especially when you are on the sick bed. You say, since I'm sick, since my body is sick, okay, but don't allow my mind to be sick. Be positive, remain calm, and enjoy yourself in sickness. I remember when I was about 17 plus, 18, I was in the first year of my university. And then I was stricken with a lot of joint pains. I couldn't walk. Able-bodied athlete, play rugby for school, represent athletics for school. Very sturdy body, very strong. But pains in the limbs, very bad. All swollen, cannot walk. Went to hospital, checked, and says, I'm very sorry, I have to hospitalize you. And you have to rest in bed. And not only rest in bed, complete rest in bed. Because I have a play cut on my back of my bed called CRIB. That means I cannot come down from the bed. Reason? Because I am having what we call rheumatic fever. Rheumatic fever is where your own, what you call antibodies, attacks your own tissues. And that's why it's attacking the limbs and it attacks my heart. So at that time, I'm still able-bodied, but because of these limb joints, I am actually complete rest in bed in the hospital. And during that period, I remember what Venerable Chief Dhammananda taught me when I was in Sunday school back in Malacca. He used to come down to Malacca almost every month. And then we would sit to listen to him. And he did mention all this. But that time, sini masuk, sini keluar. But then it was so meaningful. And when it was so meaningful, I decided that I will enjoy my stay in the hospital. I asked for 2 kai pei every day. Wow, you really can eat? Huh? Yeah, why not? I can eat. It's only my joints. My heart, well, it is actually having murmurs all the time, never mind. And I had a nice time with all the nurses because young, 17, 18. And the nurses also about 18, 19. Oh, it was a lovely time. 1 month later, the doctor shook his head and said, sorry, I do not know what I can do with you. You doesn't seem to progress. You doesn't seem to deteriorate. So why not you do this? You go back home and you rest at home. So I was discharged after 1 month, went back home. And again, that time I already went into what we call Form 6 before I went to the university, before I was actually picked up and go to the university. So all my Form 6 friends, including all my girlfriends, came to visit me. Oh, it was lovely. Every day they are here. It's like, Brother O Kim Leng. When O Kim Leng was having an accident in Sarawak, he was totally paralyzed and he was actually brought to KL hospital. And do you know, the number of girlfriends that he has to come and visit him was actually very encouraging, and all of us want to be sick also. And probably that sustained him. But the moral of the story is that we forget our teachings. But it is good to keep on remembering most of them. And true enough, the second refuge says, what did the Buddha teach? And the Buddhas have words in the Dhammapada which says, when your body is sick, do not allow your mind to be sick. And there's also another one verse which is so powerful. It's called, hatred is not overcome by hatred. By love is hatred cease. Of course, that is another analogy which I used to talk about, but we'll keep it out for today. So when you go before the Buddha, you go for your first refuge, doesn't work. You go for your Dhamma, for example, you can't remember what the Buddha taught. What was the teachings? Then never mind. You have your third line of defense. What was your third line of defense? It's your Sangha. You have taken refuge in the Sangha, isn't it? That when you are in trouble or when you have difficulties, go to the Sangha. But the Sangha is not just the monks. The Sangha is also your fellow Buddhist friends, your Kalayana Mitras. And then eventually you ask them for advice. Of course, sometimes we organize groups and we sit down together in the circle and we say, okay, anyone who has problems, raise up your problems so that we can help to counsel and to solve. But being Asians, we are all very shy to tell your problems. But never mind. All you have to do is say, my friend got a problem like this. And everyone will smile and says, now tell your friend, this is how you solve your problem. And counseling is good. Advice from the monastics is good. And thus, if you have any difficulties, you go to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And that is the meaning of refuge. So therefore, if you have a home altar, it is actually creating a, an immediate relationship and also a source ready at all times. That when you are in trouble or when you have difficulties, just sit before the Buddha image. Observe your precepts and subsequently reflect upon the Buddha's virtues, reflect upon the teachings, and reflect upon the advices given by your Kalyana Mittas, including the monastics. So this is one way of sustaining. And a lot of our Buddhist friends who do not have altar at home, maybe they would just like to keep a Buddha image. You don't have to have a proper altar. Keep a Buddha image, place it in a place of respect. And of course, some of the people who are living probably in a room, then you can place it in your room. And whenever you have difficulties, then you approach the Buddha altar and eventually reflect upon the teachings. And always remember that there is this understanding of the noble truth. I did use this word called the formula of life. This is the formula expounded by the Buddha in his first sermon. And he says that the way to end all dukkha is to understand the Four Noble Truths. And what do I mean? Is that the moment you have difficulties in your life and you are actually in state of unease, you are very unsatisfied over the way things are, then ask yourself, am I having this dukkha? Because there may be a lot of denials and say, no, I'm not suffering. No, I don't have this problem. But accept the fact that you have this problem. And then you will be, in real sense, creating the understanding. Then the second noble truth says, can you find out what was the cause of this unsatisfactoriness that is arising? There must be something which has caused it to happen. There must be something which has caused you to be unsatisfied. Then you will realize that you must have what we call attached to something, crave for something or some phenomena or some expectations which you do not want that phenomena to change. You want to remain forever like this. You want forever to be successful. You want forever to be happy. You want forever to have all the possessions that you need. You want forever that people obeys you. But everything is impermanent. Everything is subject to change. So therefore, are you craving or are you attached to something which is constantly changing and not permanent? If you are, then you are unsatisfied. And that is the reason why you are unsatisfied. Craving for existence, craving for non-existence, and craving for sensual pleasures, and including the sixth sense called the mind. So if you can come to terms with it and says, what if I recognize the cause, that these are the causes that cause me to be unhappy, that I don't want to change, but it changed, that's why I am unhappy. Can I be prepared to let it go? Detach from it, renounce from it. And if you're able to open up and let it go, does it disturb you anymore? Does it create the unsatisfactoriness in you anymore? In other words, the cessation of the cause, the letting go of the cause. And you realize that if you are able to let go, whatever little bit you have, you get a little bit more satisfied. If you can let go more, then you get more satisfied. So it commensurates with the effort that you put in. And thus, you understand that you are unsatisfied. Number two, you realize that these are the causes for unsatisfactoriness. And thirdly is, if I let go of these causes and detach from it, then these causes doesn't cause the unsatisfactoriness anymore. Then your unsatisfactoriness ceases. The cessation of dukkha. Dukkha, the cause of dukkha, and the cessation of the cause of dukkha. Tapi semua ini senang cakap tapi susah mau buat. Easier said than done. So the Buddha then gave us the fourth noble truth. The fourth noble truth is the path or the methodology that leads to the cessation of the cause. In other words, In order to be able to let go, in order to be able to renounce, in order to be able to detach yourself and cease from craving, you need to practice a noble eightfold path. Right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right method, right mindfulness, right concentration. And these are methodology that nurtures your mind and slowly trains up our mind. And then subsequently, you reduce your attachment and your craving until one fine day, you cease totally from craving. And craving was the cause for your birth. And your birth was the cause of your old age, sickness, and death. So once and for all, you cease from the cause. Once and for all, you cease from your birth. Once and for all, you cease from old age, sickness, and death. And that is called ceasing from becoming. You are no longer born again. And that is called ni varna, become. No more become. The cessation of dukkha. So therefore, when we understand this formula, anytime when there is a problem arising in our life, we say, okay, am I having a problem? What was the cause of your problem? If you really dig enough, you will find that you are attached to something which you don't want to change. But it changes. Once you can see that, then you say, okay, what if I don't get attached and let it go? Then that object or that phenomena does not create any unsatisfactoriness anymore. Your agitation, your angry, what do you call your frustrations will then slowly subside and cease. That will be the formula to solve our problems. And when we approach before the Buddha, we remember this teaching because we understand this formula. So good understanding of the formula itself is the one that sustains us and gives us that confidence, because at the end of the day, it is saddha, confidence that you are able to resolve your problem. There is no problem which cannot be resolved. So we talk about the cause of suffering. I've already gone through. And then, of course, the arising of suffering. And finally, using the Noble Eightfold Path to cease from the cause of suffering. And thus, getting that right understanding. And when you have that right understanding, you understood the universal phenomena. And correspondingly, your practice of the Dhamma will then be on a different platform. Otherwise, you will be like a on-off. You don't come to a realization. So as a person gains more and more insight, you then develop an unshakable confidence in the Buddha Dhamma. Unshakable in the sense that if there were any other exposure, you will say it's okay. I have my Buddha, I have my Dhamma, I have my Sangha. And you will not change your faith, or you will continue to be a reliable, good Buddhist. But what are the things that you realized and understand? I mentioned to you that it was impermanence. You understood what is impermanent. That's why you don't want to get attached. There's nothing for you to get attached. Because nothing is permanent, non-entity, anatta. Everything changes over time. And if you are attached to an entity which you want it to remain permanent and say, stay, don't change, you are going to be unsatisfied. And all phenomena behaves like this. And if we can have that right understanding of anicca, anatta, dukkha, from then onwards, your mind will be, what is there to get attached? What is there to be unduly disturbed when changes happen? Oh, then you learn the art of managing change. You learn the art of accepting change in your life. And any changes, irrespective of whether it's physical or mental, you'll find that, well, all changes are natural. Anicca, anatta, dukkha. Your dress get torn, your car get knocked, you lose your job. Well, some of these are the changes in life. Just have to accept it and move on. Your mind become less angry, less unhappy and become more peaceful in its place, become more bliss. So it is good to have this understanding, then you are able then to sustain for very long. Now there is these vicissitudes of life that we all got to be aware of in order to be able to understand that life is not a bed of roses, right? When there is gain, there will be loss. But when there's loss, don't despair, because there will be gain soon. Because of loss, there will be a gain. Anything that is progressive will be a gain. It's like something like when you are what we call famous. You get a lot of praise. But one day when you lose that fame, then you will get ill fame. You will get a lot of blame. You will get a lot of dishonor. And of course, happiness is because of sorrow. If you don't have sorrow, you don't see happiness. And because of sorrow, you learn to be happy. And like all phenomena, whenever there is an up, there will be a down. Whenever there is an appearance, there will be a disappearance. And all this we learn very well when we are meditating. When we are observing our breath. When we are observing our positions of sitting, walking, moving our hands, eating our food. When we are sitting and observing our feelings of calmness, feelings of happy, feelings of warm, feelings of cool. We are also, when we are sitting, we observe our thoughts. We think of this, we think of that. As the thoughts arise in our mind, we see the thoughts rise, appear, and we see our thought disappear. And at the same time, we see the development of our thoughts. A storyboard is being created. You have what we call Kaya Nupassana, Vedana Nupassana, Chitta Nupassana, and Dhamma Nupassana. These are the four bases of mindfulness. And as we are aware of all these four bases, we see its rise and its fall. We see its appearance and its disappearance. It does not exist all the time in its permanent form. It changed. From one thought, it changed to another. It develops into another thought. So don't get attached to that previous thought. Let it go. Move on to the new thought. Because the new thought is conditioned by the previous thought. And as you watch your breath, as you breathe in, you don't breathe in all the time. You also breathe out. But when you breathe out, don't worry. You will breathe in. And when you breathe in, you will breathe out. When you breathe out, you'll breathe in. And it happens in cycles and cycles. And you begin to see the real phenomena of life. So by virtue of being able to see this, then whenever you are in times of trouble, whenever you are in times of loss, whenever someone blames you, remember that there's always the other side. That you will progress and it will come after that. When the stock market is down, don't be unhappy because one day she'll go up. But when the market is up, be careful. One day will come down. So when it's up and down, don't get too dispassionately attached. Do it with your wisdom. Manage your business, manage your investments. So it is a lesson as we sustain it. We don't have to say that when I'm sitting only, I realize the truth. While we are working, while we are living our daily lives, we apply the formula, we understand the vicissitudes, we understand the characteristics of all phenomena. And thus, if you can understand this, there is actually nothing for us to get attached. That's why there is this concept called Kong or Sunyata or Anatta, because there is nothing which you can hold and arrest and say, stay, don't move, don't change. And since there's nothing to get attached and unduly disturbed, then why get worries and why get disturbed by all this? Live in accordance with it. And the blissfulness will arise. And I always like to mention that we must have that sense of gratitude. Grateful to the community, grateful to your friends, grateful to your teachers, grateful to your leaders, grateful to people who have supported you, your parents, your bosses, grateful to your subordinates, to your servants. And all these are your blessings, which you all learn from Mangala Sutta. And these are some of the suttas which are very key to the sustaining of our practice. That every time we remember that we are actually full of blessings when we practice the Dhamma. And we feel blessed indeed that we don't need to go before what you call a monastic in order to get all the water sprinkled on our head. Get all the strings. Some one string not enough, must have 2 strings. Double charge. So bliss or blessing comes from practice. And it's important to have what we call the Buddhist way of life. And what is the best Buddhist way of life is what we call the Sigalo Vada Sutta, which is called the code of ethics, the moral code that we all have to observe, and to lead our lives in order to respond to each other. And that's why we say that we support the mother and the father, which represents the East, the teachers, which represents the South, the spouse and family, our husbands and wives, that represents the West, and the friends and colleagues that represents the North. Of course, you have your Brahmins and ascetics and the monastics that you respect, that represents the zenith. And of course, the servants and the workers below that represents nadir, below. So it is these 6 directions that we have what we call a relationship. We are in this world, we are in this community because we have these 6 directions or 6 communities that we seek support and we also intend to support. So therefore, through your friends, you would like to do a lot of generosity, use a lot of kind words, friendliness, helpfulness, impartiality and integrity and sincerity. And this is how we treat our friends. Of course, your friends will then reciprocate with a lot of supportiveness. They help to protect your wealth and guide you. They provide a lot of shelter that when you visit them, they are hospitable to you and they are loyal friends. They don't abandon you when you're in trouble. And of course, they honor your family. Then you come to your parents, that you have to support them. You fulfill your duties and you take care of them when they are in old age. Now this is very important, that we owe a gratitude. And that's why I mentioned the word gratitude, because we are grateful for what they have done for us. That we owe a duty, filial or out of gratitude, that we need to support them in their old age and in their sickness. And all of us have aged parents. And eventually one day we also will fall aged and old. And our children will then be able to reciprocate because they watch you. I remember my daughter, the time when I carried my grandmother when he was sick. And I carried her to the bed, to the wheelchair, and to the hospital. And he says that that image was very, very strong in her mind. That hopefully one fine day she will be able to do that to me. But you remember the story about these blind parents, right? When the children finds the blind parents, 2 others to take care, they decide to think of a plan of how to get rid of them. So they created a basket in order to carry them and in order to put them away. But they have a little son. And the little son asked the parents, "What are you doing?" He said, "Oh, we are actually preparing this basket so that we can carry your grandparents, and then we were going to send them off." And what did the son say? "Father, mother, remember to bring the basket back, because next time I have to use it to carry you away." So it is impressed. conditions that we create as a result, that we need to cultivate this, that you must have a filial piety, take care of their needs, honor traditions. And sometimes, we need to carry on traditions, especially paying our respects, serving the teas. Some of them we say that it is very redundant, but actually if we carry it on, it's actually bring a lot of meaning to our lives. Then we deserve their inheritance. And lastly, of course, honor their passing. Give them a good send-off, right? Of course, reciprocally, they will then restrain us from evil, nurture the goodness in us, teach us a lot of skills, and give us a trade in order to be able to earn our living. And of course, arranged marriage. That one, a lot of people like to dispute that and say, no, now modern days we don't. But we still need their blessings. Arranged doesn't mean that they purposely do matchmaking for you, but they also would like to bestow their blessings. And then, of course, provide inheritance. Then we take care of our teachers. Now, our teachers, we rise to greet them because we give them that honor. We attend to them when they need certain things, especially, some of us, when we started work that time, we actually make coffee for our seniors. And some people say, how can you go so down, so low? Say, no, it is a respect that we want to serve them. And when we serve them, we take care of them, they in turn will then find that enthusiasm to actually teach us the correct way. Then, of course, eagerly receptive, serve them, and finally, of course, master their teachings. The Sifu and the Totai method is that we learn the trade from them, we master the trade from them, and give them that honor. The teachers, of course, thoroughly instruct, give them all their best, ensure the comprehension, provide a well-roundedness, provide referrals, and at the end of the day, ensure safety. And lastly, of course, to the spouse, right? The spouse is honor her or honor him, respect her fidelity or his fidelity. Finally, share authority, give them some authority, and provide gifts. Reciprocal is organize the duty well, then eventually do a lot of hospitality towards the relatives who comes, have fidelity, wise budgeting, and finally, of course, skillfulness in all chores that they're supposed to do. Now, although this code of ethics were introduced during the Buddha's time, it is actually effective until to this very day. And this is the code of ethics that as long as we shower this and reciprocate this to each other, we will then be able to sustain our practice. So basically, I have mentioned quite a lot just now, is that there was this creating a happiness in us. We need to have the art of letting go, prepared to let go, prepared to be free from attachments, managing your changes that is happening in your lives, control your anger, have a lot of laughter, always think positive, and finally, do things one step at a time. Prioritize your life. Be friendly. Have this practice of friendliness. And everybody is actually a Kalyana Mittas. And it's good that if we come from the same community in the Dhamma Center, then this will then be more fruitful and more sincere. There is always this concept that we must live in the present. Don't worry about your past. And don't speculate about your future. Because they are all beyond your control. The only moments of time that is within our control is the present moment, now. So we just have to focus on this present moment. Do whatever we can, do the best we can, and practice the most we can. And we will be justifying our past and protect our future. And of course, learn to forgive and forget. Don't simpan dendam dalam hati. A lot of time people ask me this question, why I never see you angry one? And there was also an occasion when someone comes to me after a meeting in the boardroom and says, Charlie, I see you, what you call, very angry in the meeting. I thought Buddhists are not supposed to be angry. My rebuttal was, yes, I can be angry. And I'm angry in order to reprimand, in order to educate, in order to put the point forward. But I'm not angry for a long time. In other words, your anger is there or your disappointment is there, but you're able to release it as fast as possible. In other words, jangan simpan dendam dalam hati lah. Which means after the moment is over, then reflect back and go back to your blissfulness and your calmness. And there are a lot of people who have done a lot of things which are not what you call conducive. But if you keep that in mind and do that treatment or reciprocate with that kind of treatment, then you are not following the Buddha's teaching of hatred is not overcome by hatred. By love alone is hatred cease. So metta is a very important practice. And that gives rise to forgiveness. And of course, learn to be simple. Simple life is very sustainable. And keeping yourself free from a lot of complications is indeed actually a lot of what we call contentment. So get rid of the excess, reduce and eliminate too much TV and too much drama series. Buy less, simplify your wardrobe. Everyday Nalanda t-shirt also okay lah. Spend less on social media. WhatsApp takes a lot of our time. And it's also very unhealthy and very, what do you call, impersonal. Sometimes when we talk to each other, we don't talk to each other now. No? We talk through our finger. And sometimes that person could be sitting opposite you only. And you have to tick-tick-tack, and then tell them, I'm in front of you. Huh? Yeah, I know, I saw you. Read selectively, gain some knowledge. Important, good practice. Stop overcommitting yourself. Do whatever within your capacity. A lot of us, we overcommit. We take on too much. Unfortunately, we cannot meet. And that is where we get disappointment too fast. If possible, downsize. If you live in a big villa, time to go down to an apartment. And that's what a lot of people do. You know, slowly shrink. Then you get what we call minimalist way of living. Plan everything, right? Although you say that the future is what do you call uncontrollable, but what can you do about it now? Is that you start putting and jotting it out, and this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to do. But don't worry about whether it happens or not. Don't worry that it will materialize or not. As long as you put it into a plan, chances is that it will become a reality. And meditation is actually a very important exercise. Every time when we go out in our everyday life, spend a few minutes. Even if you are in the car, spend a few minutes. Just calm yourself down and tell yourself, what am I doing now? I'm breathing. I'm driving. I am actually listening to a music. And when you are in that mode, you are actually focusing your mind. And the side product is always blissfulness and calmness. And a lot of time when we go into negotiation or meetings, just give yourself about 5 minutes. Watch your breath, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in. And when you are, what do you call, in that mode, you will tend to calm down faster. And when you are calm, walk into the room, you will make the right decisions. And when you make the right decisions, you will prosper. Fatat lah. And of course, go back to nature. Go back to nature is an important concept. And I think the pandemic itself actually helped us to realize a lot. that we have disturbed nature for a very long time, and now we must actually let nature nurture back again. Remember at the time when it was a pandemic, when we disturbed the environment less, the waters become clearer, the sky become bluer, and the grass become greener. Isn't that a wonderful moment of life? So if we respect nature and we want nature to come back, spend time with it. And as Buddhists, we are actually what you call living a natural way of life, trying to go back to nature. And that's what the Buddha taught. For 45 long years, he teaches the laws of nature. So we are actually trying to go back to nature. So with this understanding, it's always good to practice in the little ways that we can. And through this little methodology, it is good enough to sustain our practice. And we'll find that the confidence will then come back to us. And I want to go to these 3 words, which is called Pariyati Patipati Pativeda, which talks about that you learn, you get knowledge, and then you put it to a practice. And then you see that it works. And when it works, you realize it. And it is always a very good way of education. So as long as we don't realize, we will always be in the snake and ladder game. Remember this. So if we can learn as much as we can, put it to a practice, see that it works, and then it benefits us, we get a lot of confidence, we get a lot of saddha, and then we realize the good of it, we will never fall out, and our practice will always be sustained for a long, long period of time. So with that, thank you very much, and may you all be well and happy. Sadhu, sadhu.